Harlem, New York. 11:23 p.m. Saturday, November 12, 1932. The Cotton Club sits on 142nd Street like a fortress of contradiction. Black genius performing for white money under lights they're forbidden to sit beneath as customers. Inside, the air tastes like Cuban cigars, bootleg champagne, and the particular kind of humiliation that comes with entertaining people who won't shake your hand. The temperature outside has dropped to 28 degrees, but inside, the heat from 300 bodies and stage lights makes the silk dresses cling and the tuxedos wrinkle with nervous sweat. At exactly 11:31 p.m., Herman Stark, the Cotton Club's operating manager, walks through the service corridor with the confidence of a man who believes his cruelty has no consequences. Stark controls which black musicians eat and which ones starve. He decides who works and who begs. Tonight, he's about to make a decision that will teach him the difference between authority and power. 48 hours earlier, Stark had received an ultimatum from Vincent the Butcher Moretti, a mid-level capo from the downtown families who lacked discipline but possessed an abundance of sadism. Moretti wanted Clara Williams, the club's most popular hostess, delivered to his private table for entertainment. When Stark refused, not out of decency, but because Oni Madden's rules forbade touching the staff, Moretti made his position clear: you got 72 hours to change your mind, or I change it for you. Permanently. Now at 11:34 p.m., Moretti sits at table 7 with 2 bodyguards, a broken champagne bottle in his hand, and a smile that promises violence. He's drunk, entitled, and convinced that his downtown connections make him untouchable in Harlem. Clara stands frozen beside the table, tears streaming down her face, as Moretti presses the jagged glass against her throat. "Bring me Stark," Moretti slurs to his bodyguard. Time's up. The entire club falls silent. The jazz band stops mid-note. 300 white patrons watch in horrified fascination as the sanctuary of segregation, their protected playground in a black neighborhood, transforms into a crime scene. Oni Madden, the club's owner and a man who survived the tong wars of Hell's Kitchen, stands 20 feet away, paralyzed. He knows that touching a made man like Moretti will trigger a war with the 5 families that will burn Harlem to ash. Moretti knows it too. "You run a zoo, Madden," Moretti grins, drawing a thin line of blood across Clara's dark skin. "And I'm the zookeeper tonight." The humiliation is systematic, absolute. In this moment, the power dynamic of the entire establishment shifts. Madden, the white king of Harlem nightlife, is rendered impotent in his own castle. He has 24 hours to solve a problem that politics prevents him from addressing. He needs a weapon that doesn't care about Italian politics or downtown treaties. He needs someone who understands that respect is a currency more valuable than gold, and that disrespect is a debt paid in blood. At 12:47 a.m., as Moretti finally releases Clara and walks out laughing, leaving behind overturned tables and traumatized staff, Oni Madden makes the call he never thought he would make. He doesn't call the police. He doesn't call his partners. He sends a runner to 138th Street with a message for Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson. The message is an admission of defeat and a plea for salvation. "I need your help. Name your price." 72 hours later, Vincent Moretti will be found on the steps of his own social club downtown, his hands crushed beyond recognition, with a note pinned to his bloodied shirt courtesy of the Cotton Club. No charge. The story of how Oni Madden begged Bumpy Johnson for help is a warning that history has tried to hide. If you enjoy these deep dives into the underworld, you can support the channel by buying me a coffee using the link in the description. Your support keeps these investigations alive. Now, let's go back to November 12, 1932, and understand exactly what happened when the white underworld learned they were guests in Bumpy's house. November 12, 1932, 9:15 p.m. The Cotton Club operates as a fortress of racial paradox, a monument to American contradiction where black genius performs for white money. Under chandeliers they're forbidden to sit beneath as customers. Located on 142nd Street in the heart of Harlem, the club maintains strict segregation enforced by white gangster money. 300 white patrons fill the tables tonight, their faces flushed with bootleg champagne, and the particular thrill of watching black bodies dance for their entertainment. The air tastes like Cuban cigars, French perfume, and the specific brand of humiliation that comes with excellence displayed for people who consider you inferior. Herman Stark moves through this engineered order with the mechanical efficiency of a prison warden. Stark serves as Oni Madden's operational enforcer, the man who maintains the delicate balance between entertainment and segregation. He spent 15 years solving problems that shouldn't exist, enforcing unspoken rules with surgical precision. No trouble with white customers. No hands on the girls. No business discussed where the band can hear. Stark understands that if the talent feels unsafe, the music stops, and if the music stops, the money stops. He enforces these rules without sentiment or apology. Tonight, Stark faces a problem that threatens to destroy everything. 3 days earlier, Vincent the Butcher Moretti walked into his office and delivered an ultimatum with casual brutality. Moretti, a mid-level capo known for sloppy violence that embarrasses even his own bosses, wanted Clara Williams, the club's most popular hostess, delivered to his table for private use. When Stark refused, citing Madden's cardinal rule about staff protection, Moretti leaned across the desk and tapped cigarette ash onto Stark's ledger. "You got 72 hours to change your mind," he said, "or I change it for you. Permanently." The ash remained on the paper like a signature of impending doom. That deadline expired tonight. At 10:47 p.m., Moretti arrives with 2 bodyguards, already intoxicated, claiming Table 7 with the arrogance of a man who believes downtown rules apply everywhere. He drinks Madden's most expensive champagne while making increasingly aggressive demands, snapping his fingers at hostesses, dragging them closer than they want to be. Every 15 minutes, he summons Clara to his table, examining her like livestock before dismissing her with crude commentary. The entire club watches this systematic humiliation, understanding they're witnessing something that violates even their twisted social contract. Stark watches from the shadows, paralyzed by impossible mathematics. Refuse Moretti again and face his wrath. Comply and violate the one rule that keeps Madden's operation functional. His hand hovers near his jacket pocket, but he knows the hierarchy of organized crime protects Moretti more effectively than any law. At 11:34 p.m., the system fails completely. When Clara delivers another bottle of champagne to Moretti's table, he grabs her wrist with enough force to leave bruises. She tries to pull away. Moretti smashes the champagne bottle against the table edge and presses the jagged glass against her throat. "Bring me Stark," he tells his bodyguard. Time's up. The Cotton Club falls silent. The orchestra stops mid-song. 300 white patrons freeze, watching their protected playground transform into a crime scene. Oni Madden stands 20 feet away, his face drained of color, paralyzed by the mathematics of mob politics. Moretti is a made man. Touching him means war with the 5 families. Moretti knows this, his smile confirming his own invincibility. "You run a zoo, Madden," Moretti announces. "I'm the zookeeper tonight." He drags the glass across Clara's throat, drawing blood, then releases her. At 11:51 p.m., he walks out laughing. In his office, Madden sits staring at a piece of paper. With a trembling hand, he writes 2 words, Bumpy Johnson. He understands he's about to make a deal with the devil. November 13th, 1932, 1:23 a.m. Marcus Garvey Park sits frozen under winter moonlight, a patch of neutral ground where the streetlights fail to penetrate the bare canopy. The temperature has dropped to 24 degrees, turning breath into visible clouds and freezing the mud solid beneath their feet. Oni Madden paces near the stone wall, sweat running down his temples despite the bitter cold. He checks his watch obsessively, lighting cigarettes with trembling fingers. The owner of the Cotton Club, a man who orders politicians around like waiters, looks less like a kingpin tonight and more like a defendant awaiting sentencing. Bumpy Johnson emerges from the shadows at exactly 1:31 a.m., 8 minutes late by design. He wears a charcoal overcoat and moves with deliberate silence, studying Madden with the detached focus of a judge reviewing evidence. While Madden fidgets and sweats, Bumpy stands perfectly still, hands deep in his pockets, forcing the white gangster to break the silence and confess his desperation first. Madden explains the predicament in rushed sentences, his voice cracking with humiliation. Vincent Moretti violated every rule. Assaulted Clara Williams in front of 300 witnesses. Proved that downtown muscle trumps uptown authority. He pulls out a thick envelope containing $5,000, enough to buy 3 brownstones in 1932, thrusting it toward Bumpy like a peace offering. He wants to buy a hit. He wants a simple transaction. Bumpy doesn't acknowledge the envelope. He keeps his eyes fixed on Madden's face, letting 37 seconds of silence expand between them before delivering his verdict. You let a downtown rat disrespect a Harlem woman in a Harlem club, he says with measured calm. That's not a business problem, that's a community problem. The distinction is absolute. Business problems get solved with money. Community problems require restoration of order, re-establishment of hierarchy, lessons taught in blood. Madden tries again with the cash, raising the offer to $10,000. Bumpy rejects it without ceremony. Money is temporary. Territory is permanent. He outlines his terms with surgical precision. First, he demands control of the numbers racket on 3 specific blocks currently paying tribute to Madden's organization, blocks generating $5,000 weekly. Second, complete operational freedom to handle Moretti without interference or questions from Madden's people. Third, Clara Williams keeps her job with a 20% raise and works under Bumpy's protection, meaning anyone who touches her answers to him, not to Madden. Madden hesitates, calculating the cost. He's surrendering income, authority, and territory to solve a problem his own power structure created. But the alternative is watching his empire crumble as downtown gangsters realize they can violate his rules without consequence. The mathematics of survival force his hand. He extends it toward Bumpy. Bumpy takes the handshake, his grip cold and firm, sealing a deal that transforms the Cotton Club from Madden's exclusive territory into shared jurisdiction. This ends when respect is restored, he warns. How much blood that takes depends on how fast Moretti learns. At 2:47 a.m., Bumpy walks away from the meeting, pulling a small notebook from his coat. He stops at a corner payphone, dropping a nickel into the slot and delivering 4 words to his lieutenant. Find his every weakness. Madden watches Bumpy disappear into the Harlem darkness, finally understanding he's handed control to a man who operates by rules he doesn't comprehend. In 12 hours, Vincent Moretti will discover that his 72-hour deadline has been inverted into a countdown to his own systematic destruction. November 13, 1932, 8 a.m. Bumpy Johnson's crew begins systematic surveillance of Vincent Moretti with military precision, transforming revenge into intelligence warfare. 4 men rotate in 12-hour shifts documenting every movement with the methodical efficiency of federal agents. They track which restaurants Moretti frequents, noting he arrives at his social club at 9:47 a.m. daily and leaves for lunch at precisely 1:15 p.m. They record which women he visits, which streets he considers safe, how long his driver waits outside each location. The surveillance team operates invisibly, blending into newspaper stands and shop fronts, collecting data that will transform into weapons more deadly than bullets. By 11:30 a.m., they discover Moretti's fatal weakness through patient observation and a compromised building superintendent. Vincent has been skimming money from his own bosses for 8 months, diverting collections into a private account his superiors don't know exists. Every Thursday, he meets with a nervous accountant named Solomon Weiss at a Bronx safe house, reviewing ledgers that document systematic embezzlement totaling $43,000. The stolen cash sits in a modest apartment on Girard Avenue, protected by a single bodyguard who reads racing forms instead of watching the street. It's enough money to trigger execution if his bosses discover the theft. Bumpy reviews this intelligence at 1:47 p.m., making his strategic decision with cold calculation. Immediate violence would be satisfying, but temporary. A bullet ends Moretti's life, but doesn't restore the respect he violated at the Cotton Club. Instead, Bumpy chooses smart brutality, the systematic dismantling of Moretti's reputation before destroying his body. He'll weaponize Moretti's own paranoia, making him suspect his crew, forcing mistakes that justify elimination even by mob standards. At 2:15 p.m., the psychological warfare begins with surgical precision. Moretti's burgundy Cadillac, which he treats like a mistress, is found torched outside his apartment building, reduced to a smoking skeleton of twisted metal and melted leather. The fire is contained to the vehicle, executed professionally, leaving no witnesses willing to speak. Simultaneously, 7 dead rats appear on his doorstep, arranged in a perfect circle, their throats cut cleanly. No notes, no threats, just silence and the implication of organized malice targeting him specifically. Moretti's paranoia spreads like infection through his mind. He suspects betrayal within his own crew, convinced someone leaked his location and schedule to unknown enemies. By 4:30 p.m., he's dragging his own men into the back room of his social club, demanding confessions through violent interrogation. He breaks his driver's fingers looking for traitors who don't exist, creating actual resentment where Bumpy only planted suspicion. His lieutenant watches with growing unease as their leader unravels, attacking loyal soldiers for crimes they haven't committed. At 6:30 p.m., Bumpy's photographer captures the evidence that will seal Moretti's fate. From a rooftop across Girard Avenue, a long lens documents Vincent meeting Solomon Weiss, exchanging ledgers and cash bags through the safe house window. The photographs are grainy but undeniable, showing dates, amounts, and Moretti's signature on falsified collection reports. Bumpy studies these images with satisfaction, recognizing them as insurance preventing mob retaliation when Moretti disappears. The planted evidence strategy unfolds with devastating precision. Bumpy arranges for selective financial records to be anonymously delivered to rival capos within the 5 families, men who already resent Moretti's sloppy violence and lack of discipline. The seed is planted that Vincent's recent erratic behavior stems from guilt and fear of exposure, not external threats. Whispers begin traveling through downtown backrooms by 9 p.m. questions form about what else Moretti might be hiding. At 11:45 p.m., Moretti receives his first direct message. His apartment phone rings with the sharp urgency of bad news. He answers expecting his lieutenant's voice or his boss's summons. Instead, he hears Clara Williams crying, the same terrified sobs from the Cotton Club assault, recorded and played back with deliberate cruelty. No words, No threats. Just her tears echoing through the line for 16 seconds before the connection cuts dead. Moretti smashes the phone against the wall, his paranoia now absolute. The next morning, in a crowded Italian restaurant on Mulberry Street, Vincent makes his fatal mistake. Convinced his most trusted lieutenant leaked information to his enemies, he attacks the man in front of 17 witnesses, breaking his jaw with a wine bottle in an explosion of desperate violence. The sound of bone cracking echoes through the dining room as blood pools on checkered tile. His own crew watches in stunned silence as their leader destroys the last bridge to loyalty and protection. In that single act of paranoid rage, Moretti isolates himself completely, transforming from predator to prey, exactly where Bumpy Johnson wants him. November 14, 1932, 4:20 p.m. The trap is set not with steel, but with whispers traveling through Harlem's network of bartenders and taxi drivers. Bumpy Johnson orchestrates the perfect lure through carefully planted rumors, reaching Vincent Moretti through 3 separate sources by 6:15 p.m., each confirming the others, building credibility through repetition. Clara Williams wants to apologize privately to avoid further trouble. She's terrified of retaliation and willing to submit to whatever he demands. The message appeals directly to Moretti's narcissism, presenting submission as validation of his power rather than the obvious trap it represents. The meeting location carries symbolic weight that Bumpy selected with surgical precision. The abandoned warehouse on 125th Street sits like a jagged scar between Harlem and downtown territory, a borderland where jurisdictions blur and screams go unheard. The building has been empty for 8 months, its windows shattered and doors hanging loose, perfect for the privacy Moretti's arrogance demands, while providing tactical advantages for the execution Bumpy has planned. Moretti's arrogance blinds him completely to the obvious setup. He interprets Clara's supposed submission as confirmation of his worldview, proof that his brutality at the Cotton Club achieved its intended effect of terrorizing her into obedience. His recent violent interrogations have cost him most of his crew's loyalty, leaving him with only 2 bodyguards willing to accompany him out of fear rather than respect. At 10:42 p.m., Vincent arrives in his black Cadillac, stepping into the warehouse loading bay with the confidence of a man who believes he owns the city. His remaining bodyguards fan out with nervous efficiency, flashlights cutting through darkness thick with dust and rotting wood. They fail to notice the figures positioned in the rafters above. The ambush executes with surgical precision. Bumpy's men eliminate both bodyguards within 4 seconds using silenced weapons, 2 muffled coughs that sound like someone clearing their throat. The bodies drop simultaneously, their flashlights rolling across concrete and creating spinning shadows. Precision replaces chaos. Moretti spins toward the sound, reaching for his weapon, but finds himself surrounded by darkness and professional execution. Bumpy emerges from the shadows completely unarmed, his hands visible and empty, forcing Moretti to face him man-to-man without the protection of firearms or bodyguards. He wears his gray suit immaculate and buttoned, walking forward with the confidence of a judge approaching the bench. The psychological impact is devastating, as Moretti recognizes the man controlling Harlem operates by a different code entirely. "You put your hands on a woman in my neighborhood," Bumpy states without emotion, his voice echoing off brick walls. "You threatened a business under my protection. You disrespected people I'm responsible for." Each sentence lands like a verdict, building the case for what follows. There's no anger, no passion, just cold recitation of facts that justify execution. Bumpy signals to his men, who force Moretti to his knees and pin his arms to a wooden crate. What follows is systematic destruction, not random violence. Using a carpenter's hammer, Bumpy methodically breaks every bone in Moretti's hands, the same hands that pressed broken glass to Clara Williams' throat. 8 bones in each hand shattered with deliberate precision, transforming weapons of assault into useless ruins of crushed cartilage and splintered fingers. As Moretti screams and bleeds, Bumpy places the embezzlement records on his chest, photographs and ledgers documenting 8 months of theft from his own organization. The evidence ensures that when the 5 families find this body, they'll conclude this was internal justice for betrayal, not an outside hit demanding retaliation. At 11:37 p.m., as Moretti's consciousness fades into shock, Bumpy pins a handwritten note to his jacket, courtesy of the Cotton Club. No charge. The message transcends this single execution, serving as a declaration of independence for Harlem, speaking to every downtown gangster who mistakes this neighborhood for their playground. The body will be discovered at dawn exactly where Bumpy wants it found. November 15th, 1932. 6:15 a.m. Vincent Moretti's body is discovered on the limestone steps of his own social club on Mulberry Street, positioned with theatrical precision as a public monument to consequences. He is not hidden in a trunk or dumped in the Hudson River. He is displayed. His crushed hands rest folded across his chest, the embezzlement ledgers pinned beneath them like a business card, the note reading courtesy of the Cotton Club. No charge. The positioning is strategic choreography designed to control the narrative before questions can form. This is not random gang violence. This is a communiqué written in blood and ink for the 5 families. By 8:30 a.m., representatives from 3 families examine the evidence with forensic attention. The ledgers document systematic theft spanning 8 months, $43,000 diverted from collections that should have reached their bosses. The photographs show Moretti meeting his accountant, exchanging cash and falsified reports. The broken hands suggest interrogation and punishment, standard procedure for thieves caught stealing from their own organization. Within 2 hours, the consensus forms that this was justified internal discipline, not an outside hit requiring retaliation. Bumpy Johnson has engineered perfect political cover, transforming murder into acceptable business practice. Oni Madden receives confirmation by telephone at 9:47 a.m., sitting in his Cotton Club office with morning light cutting through Venetian blinds. Relief floods through him as he realizes Bumpy has solved his problem without triggering the war that would have burned Harlem to ash. But relief quickly transforms into understanding of the deeper transaction. He now owes Bumpy Johnson a debt that can never be fully repaid, a favor that shifts the fundamental power structure of organized crime in Manhattan. The white gangster who owned Harlem's premier nightclub has become a tenant paying tribute to a black authority he previously refused to acknowledge. The transformation ripples through downtown social clubs and backroom poker games throughout the day. Conversations occur in hushed Italian and Yiddish, reassessing the mathematics of territorial control. Downtown gangsters who considered Harlem their colonial playground now understand they operate there by permission, not by right. The lesson is absolute. Disrespect in Harlem carries consequences that downtown politics cannot prevent. Clara Williams returns to work at the Cotton Club that evening with a 20% raise and knowledge that fundamentally alters her relationship to power. The law offered no protection when Moretti pressed broken glass to her throat. But her community responded with systematic violence that eliminated the threat and restored her dignity. She walks through the club with visible confidence, understanding that protection doesn't come from police badges, but from the quiet knowledge that someone with real power considered what happened to her an unacceptable insult. Word spreads through Harlem's barbershops, churches, and street corners with the velocity of revelation. Bumpy Johnson forced the white mob to respect black women and black workers, not through negotiation, but through the systematic destruction of a man who thought himself untouchable. The story becomes mythology that transforms Bumpy from neighborhood enforcer into community protector. Herman Stark's behavior changes with visible caution. The arrogance is gone, replaced by nervous respect. He addresses staff by their names instead of barking orders, understanding that disrespect now carries consequences Madden cannot prevent. The hierarchy has been rewritten in Moretti's blood. The 3 blocks of numbers operations, 132nd, 133rd, and 134th Streets, transfer to Bumpy's control without ceremony. Just quiet understanding between Madden and his new partner. $5,000 weekly begins flowing into Bumpy's organization. Permanent income that compounds his political power throughout Harlem. 7 days later, Bumpy Johnson walks into the Cotton Club as a customer, one of the first black patrons allowed through doors that previously existed to exclude him. Oni Madden personally ensures his table receives the best service, positioning him where white millionaires usually sit. This is not friendship. This is not equality. This is respect earned through the only currency the underworld understands, the systematic destruction of those who mistake cruelty for strength. December 1932. The Cotton Club continues to thrive through the winter months, its neon lights cutting through the Depression-era darkness of 142nd Street like beacons of defiant prosperity. Jazz still pours onto the pavement through open doors, and limousines still deliver wealthy white patrons seeking exotic thrills in the heart of Harlem. The cash registers ring with mechanical precision, bottles empty and refill, stage lights rise and fall on cue. But beneath this polished routine, the unspoken rules governing the club's operation have been rewritten in blood and broken bones. The air inside feels different, charged with a new tension born of respect rather than fear. The staff moves with different confidence, understanding that protection exists beyond the promises of white management. Bumpy Johnson's elevation in status becomes undeniable throughout December as his reputation spreads through both legitimate and criminal circles. He has proven that strategic intelligence combined with controlled violence defeats raw brutality every time. Vincent Moretti represented the old model of gangster power, men who relied on casual cruelty and downtown connections to enforce their will. Bumpy demonstrated superior sophistication, using psychological warfare and planted evidence to eliminate an enemy while simultaneously preventing retaliation. In the underworld's calculus, he outmaneuvered a made man from the Five Families without firing a shot in anger, using their own internal politics as the weapon of execution. This level of tactical brilliance forces a complete reevaluation of what black organized crime is capable of achieving. The lesson absorbs deeply into the consciousness of both black and white operators throughout Harlem. There are now consequences for casual cruelty, even when perpetrators believe they're protected by downtown connections or police payoffs. Restaurant managers who previously docked wages arbitrarily now pay in full. Club owners who tolerated customer abuse of staff now intervene with visible caution. Speakeasy operators treat their black employees with noticeable respect. These changes aren't born of moral awakening or sudden racial enlightenment, but stem purely from calculated fear of unknown consequences, the terrifying possibility that another Bumpy Johnson might be watching, waiting for a reason to intervene. Fear proves to be a more effective tool for social change in the underworld than any civil rights protest. Oni Madden's relationship with Bumpy evolves into grudging respect mixed with permanent resentment. He recognizes with absolute clarity that Bumpy saved his business from a disastrous mob war and likely saved his life from Moretti's unpredictable violence. But salvation came at the irreversible cost of his independence. Every week, when collections from those 3 blocks flow to Bumpy's organization, Madden is reminded that he no longer rules the Cotton Club as an absolute monarch, but operates it as a partnership where he must negotiate rather than dictate. The philosophical implications extend far beyond simple territorial control. Bumpy didn't just eliminate a single enemy through superior tactics. He established a principle that would define his entire rise to kingpin status over the next 3 decades. True power isn't about being the loudest or most violent man in the room. It's about controlling consequences, understanding your enemy's internal rules better than they do, and using those rules to destroy them legally within their own system. Violence is easy, available to any fool with a gun and sufficient rage, but systematic humiliation of enemies while simultaneously protecting your community represents genuine power that compounds over time more reliably than fear. Years later, Clara Williams would tell her children about the night the world changed, describing not the fear or broken glass at her throat, but the aftermath when a black man in a gray suit made the white underworld apologize without saying a word. Her testimony preserves the truth that history books often omit. Dignity in Harlem was purchased with the currency of organized violence. The closing image of December 1932 captures Bumpy Johnson walking down Lenox Avenue in his signature gray suit, moving through the crowd not as a gangster, but as a sovereign. Having established that Harlem operates by Harlem rules regardless of who claims ownership on paper. The Cotton Club incident established the principle that would define Bumpy Johnson's entire career. Violence is easy, but systematic humiliation of your enemies while protecting your community, that's power. And power, unlike violence, compounds over time. When historians write about the Harlem Renaissance, they focus on the artists and writers. They rarely mention the man who made sure those artists could perform without fear, who established that respect isn't negotiable, and who taught the white underworld that black Harlem was never their colony. It was always Bumpy's kingdom.